After talking about the different ecological successions and biomes, we're going to move into biotic and abiotic factors. So with the different biomes, we're looking at like the grasslands or the forest areas or the deserts that exist, Arctic areas, and the different types of plants are going to lead to different types of animals in an area. So when we look at the different types of things living in an area, we're looking at the biotic features. So all the living or once living features of an environment. When we think of bio, we're thinking of life. So we're looking at the organisms in an area. Those organisms are going to find their own little niches or carve out these little regions that they're going to exist in. The area that benefits them the most with the plants or organisms that they need to be around so that they can continue to survive. So looking at the biosphere here, as opposed to abiotic features, when we add A to the front of that, then we're looking at non-living things. So in that case, there's different factors that we have. We have physical factors and chemical factors. But again, looking at all of the non-living features of the environment. So in terms of the spheres we're looking at here, we're looking at the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and the geosphere for our abiotic features. So in this case, even the sunlight even slight changes in either biotic or abiotic factors are going to have a major consequence on the entire ecosystem. A little bit of a change to the sunlight, to the temperature, to the amount of water in an area will have a big influence, whether that's a flooding area or a drought, that's going to have a major impact on the entire ecosystem. We look at the atoms that are going to be making up the different organisms in an ecosystem. They're going to be cycled repeatedly between the biotic and abiotic parts of the ecosystem. An easy way to think of that one is as we breathe, we take in oxygen and we change that to carbon dioxide. So we ourselves are living things, so we would fit into that biotic side. We're breathing in the atmosphere, abiotic gases, taking that oxygen and changing some of those atoms in that into then carbon dioxide, some of that waste in our bodies that we then exhale back into the atmosphere. Those abiotic features can be things like temperature and light, soil, could also influence these species and their ability to survive. Some animals like a little bit warmer temperatures, more light. Some are more nocturnal, like colder temperatures. Different plants are going to be able to grow better in different types of soil than others. So we try to make sure that the different ecosystems are set up for those different types of organisms. Those organisms are going to depend on their environmental interactions with the other living things and with non-living things in the area. So again, some plants like a lot of water, some plants don't like a lot of water. So that would be a situation. The pH levels of soil, which we're going to be talking about later, are going to have an impact on this as well. This orange box here does a good job of explaining how plants produce food using abiotic factors through photosynthesis. So the plants are going to take in sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. And then through photosynthesis, they're going to change those things back into oxygen, which they give off back to the environment, and then to carbohydrates or sugars that are going to be consumed by other organisms as they eat the plants. So we see those changes taking place. As energy gets mixed in, the plants are taking some of these abiotic factors and converting them or changing them into other types. When we look at the components of an ecosystem, they're all going to interact with each other and they're going to influence each other in different ways. Taking a look at this picture, kind of looking at the living things in the picture, we have that puffin on the rock. We have the seagull flying through the air. We have the otter swimming in the water, the bear up on the rock. We have the whale swimming around in the water there, the seals off to the left there. Then we have the moss growing on the rocks. We have the plants and grasses growing. And then we have the large and small trees growing over to the right there. So that would be a pretty good list of all the biotic factors or living things in an image like this. As we look at the abiotic factors, in the picture, we look at the sunlight there giving us energy, the rocks in the picture, the water, the air, the temperature. So they put a thermometer there to kind of explain that different temperatures are going to be existing. And again, going back to that biosphere, and looking at the different areas of the earth, they're going to have different temperatures. We look at the soil. Now, the soil itself is going to be made up of weathered pieces of rock. So rock not being a living thing, the soil itself made of the sand, silt, and clay, not a living thing. We look at the climate, different than the temperature and the weather. Climate is going to be what we expect for an area over a long period of time, kind of our expectations for the seasons, where weather and temperature are what's happening right now when we look outside. Clouds would also be one of the abiotic factors, and that kind of rounding out there the different biotic and abiotic features in this picture. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is going to be the different types of soil or different parts dealing with soil. We'll talk about the things living in soil and how important soil is to the earth itself. The last part here where we're going to be talking about the soil. So the soil in an area is going to be a mixture of the rocks and minerals, air, water, and organic matter. The rocks in the area are eventually going to break down or weather, and that's going to make up the soil. Our soil is going to have something close to about 25% air, 25% water, some 5% or so organic material, and then there are minerals. Now, our minerals are going to change from area to area. And the material making up those minerals, the amount of sand, silt, and clay in there is going to change as well. So it's not always perfectly in these different ratios, and in different parts of the earth that does change. But that's a pretty good generalization there for making up the different types of soil. Within the soil, we have a lot of living things. The soil itself, while we say it is alive here, the soil, the sand, the silt, and the clay parts are abiotic features, but it does contain a lot of the bacteria and protozoas and fungi and arthropods, the algae and nematodes. So in that way, the soil has a lot of life in it. It's its own complete self-sustaining ecosystem. In that way, it has one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. A lot of living things in there. We find different types of bacteria. And as we kind of dig through the soil more and explore this, we look at different areas of the earth and try to take more soil samples and see what's crawling around in there or living in there, especially with the microbiomes taking place there and the microbiology of the soil. A lot of living things are in there. There's more living organisms in a handful of soil than there are people on the planet. And we're just over 8 billion people on the planet now. And we're seeing now, especially, we're using microscopes now in the past few hundred years and understanding these microorganisms more and how much something like soil is actually alive. In the same way we're saying soil is alive, it's like saying that there's living things in water. We take a scoop of water, put under a microscope, and we could see things swimming around in the water. The water itself, not alive, but stuff swimming around in the water is alive. So same thing here with soil. As we start to look at the soil profile, we see the different horizons. Those horizons are the different layers. So we color in those layers different colors to kind of see the separation between those different parts of the layers. So we have the humus at the top, which is kind of the organic material. Then we have the topsoil where we have a lot of our nutrients, and that's the area where a lot of the plants want to live with their roots in that area, because those are the way they're going to be able to suck up a lot of those nutrients. When we do a garden, whether it's a container garden or a flower box or hanging baskets, we're going to use topsoil in a lot of cases to fill those areas, because that's going to give us the most nutrients for the different parts or the different plants growing in that area. Below that, we get the subsoil, which we still have a good amount of nutrients, but they're going to pack in a little bit more. And that's where our taller trees, bushes, and shrubs are going to kind of get their roots into that layer, give them a little bit more stability so they can grow taller. And then we get down into some of the parent material. The parent material is going to be the broken up pieces of rock. So it gets into a little bit more of a rocky, gravelly area in that way. And below that, we have the bedrock, our R horizon. So we can kind of see the humus or O horizons, a lot of organic material in the soil, comes from the decaying organisms, mostly leaves, twigs, animal remains, and waste. Those animal remains and things like that, some of the fertilizers, manure could be also thrown in with that. But that's going to add a lot of the nutrients to the soil. So we call it the O horizon for the organic material in that part. Next, we would have the topsoil or our A horizon, which is the loose soil, which is going to be rich in organic material needed by the plants. It is going to contain a lot of the humus and nitrogen from those fertilizers. It is the most soil life. It has the most soil life there. So a lot of the living things, our worms, our ants, our insects crawling around in there, different other organisms, rodents even crawling around in there into that topsoil, mixing that up, aerating it even, adding a lot more organic material to that soil and more nutrients. Below that, we would have our B horizon or the subsoil. Again, it's still going to be rich in minerals. A lot of those minerals from the topsoil are going to wash down and kind of percolate down into that subsoil. So a lot of rich minerals in the subsoil. And it gets more of a reddish brown color. We kind of looked at a shadow box like sample of soil profile in class, and we see that the subsoil has more of a reddish brown color to it from the rusted irons that are going to wash down into this layer. It's still going to contain some humus, but it's also going to start to contain a lot more of the clay, and that's going to help it to kind of get some more of that water and hold on to some more of that water, which is going to be good for the roots of the bigger plants, and it's going to pack them in a little bit tighter as well. Next, we go into the C horizon or the parent material, mostly pieces of weathered, broken up rock here. The layers above this are going to form from this layer. So our broken rock is what's going to give us the soil in an area. And this is also going to determine the pH level for the soil. The pH level is going to be the acidity of the soil. Different plants like more acidic soil, different plants like less acidic soil. We even talked about some plants that will change colors based on the pH of the soil. And in that case, we're looking at like something like a hydrangea that's going to be more of a pink or purple color, or sometimes more of a blue color based on the acidity levels of the soil that you're planting them in. And that all comes back to that parent material and some of the rocks. Below that, we get to the R horizon, which is for rock, and that's our bedrock. It's a massive rock like granite, quartz, limestone, sandstone. It's not a soil layer. This is where the soil stops. When we get back to the rocks, it's going to be located underneath the C horizon. These horizons can take different sizes, and even there could be a little bit of a transition area between some of these. Depending on the health of the soil in an area, they could change the thickness of the topsoil or the subsoil or the parent material in an area. So we're going to see different thicknesses for these different regions. It's not always exactly the same, but they will follow that same pattern where there will be topsoil, then the B horizon subsoil, and then the parent material before we get to the rock layers underneath. When we look at the texture of the soil, this is where we have our sand, silt, and clay. With the sand, silt, and clay, the sand being the largest of those particles leaves the most gaps in for air and water to mix in. We get to the silt, that's much smaller, it's kind of our medium size, but it definitely fills in a little bit more. And then when we get to our clay, there's not a lot of gaps for air and water to get down in there. So we kind of talked about different regions like Florida that would have a lot of sand mixed in with their soil. So when they get heavy rains, the ground there, the dirt there, the soil can soak up a lot more water and it will percolate down into the ground faster with more gaps from the sand in their soil, where here in northeastern PA, we have a little bit more silt and clay mixed in, so that water will lay at the surface and we get puddles that will stick around a little bit longer because of that mixture of silt and clay, slowing the water from soaking down into the dirt quite as much. The soil processes recycle the nutrients so living things can use them over time. We talked about crop rotations and getting different plants in different areas. Some plants will absorb or take out more nutrients or leave other nutrients behind. So this is where that idea of crop rotation becomes something to kind of consider for farming. As we rotate crops, we're removing some nutrients and adding others back to the soil, and a new crop could be planted in that area, taking out some of the other nutrients and replacing some of the depleted nutrients. So in that way, we can kind of recycle some of the lost nutrients and minerals in the soil so that we have a healthy soil system for growing crops all the time. The soil can act also as a filter for underground water, filtering out a lot of the pollutants. So as water gets onto the land, it then kind of sinks down into what we call aquifers. And in those aquifers, that's where we get a lot of our drinking water or well water down inside the earth. And the soil and rocks in that case can filter out a lot of those pollutants. There are some downsides there where it can concentrate some of those pollutants in the soil, and that could have some damaging effects as well. But overall, the soil is home to a variety of living things and extremely important for life on the planet. From here, we are going to take a few minutes and talk about GMOs. So I'm going to set up another video for that, where we're going to talk about genetically modified organisms and kind of how that affects farming and crops. And a little bit of like a current event lesson in that case as we talk about GMOs and crops in the next part. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by in class and ask. And otherwise, I hope this helps.